Support for the Bittersweet Life comes from listeners, people who love the show enough to donate at our website, thebittersweetlife.net, or through Patreon at patreon.com/thebittersweetlifepodcast. If you've never heard this show before, glad you found us. I'm Katy Sewell. I'm a longtime public radio producer and host who 5 years ago stepped off the path, quit my job, and moved to Rome. That was very out of character for me. But that's where this show begins, and where we begin exploring what happens when you take a risk. What happens when you decide to begin again? Or what happens when you move abroad? Or even just away? Together we hope to discover what possibilities life is still offering us. My co-host is Tiffany Parks. She's a writer and an expat living in Rome for the last decade. She dreamed of moving to Rome, and so she went. No real plan other than to try. We're childhood friends, too. We met on the school bus in the 6th grade. Don't be afraid to start way back at the beginning of the show. That's when we're on the streets of Rome. And subscribe and join us today, too. We'll keep you in good company, and you might just change your life. Now, on with the show. Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katy Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
And today, we're kind of following up on the language episode, sort of. It was just sort of all these questions that were raised to me while I was putting the language episode together.
And by the way, that went up last week. So if you haven't listened to that yet, you might want to go back and listen to the language episode first. This isn't technically a two-parter, but we might draw on some things that we talked about last week.
Yeah, so there were a couple things while I was editing that episode that popped into my mind. Because we were talking a lot about how you and Claudio's relationship is changing based on the fact that you're speaking English to him more now, when back in the day you were speaking to him only in Italian and he didn't really know English that well. How that has subtly changed over time. I don't know, it just got me wondering a little bit more about what it's like to learn a language and navigate a business world in a just day-to-day world versus learning a language and actually trying to navigate the dating world. And which, seems like it wouldn't be that wildly different. But another thing we kind of touched on was how hard it is when you're first learning a language to have a sense of humor or have any sense of other people's sense of humor or have charm in social situations.
It's so hard.
When you got to Rome, you were single, weren't you?
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if just moving to Rome was so overwhelming that you were like, I don't need to date anybody. I'm free and in charge. But I would feel eventually, if you are living in a foreign language and you do want to start dating people and not just the expats around you, is that a totally different challenge?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it couldn't not be. I immediately was ready to date when I became an expat. I had just gotten out of a 6-year relationship, less than 6 months before. And I had really not been single any of my adult life. So I was ready to date and have fun.
Did part of the reason why you moved when you did have to do with the ending of that 6-year relationship?
It was a big help because I had wanted to move to Italy with or without my ex. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know how we would pull it off, if we would go together, if I would go. I really wanted to move to Italy. It was one of those dreams I had, as you know, for years. And we broke up for totally other reasons. And in the month that followed that, in which I was very sad because obviously he was a very important part of my life for many, many years. And it was a mutual breakup, but that doesn't make it less painful. I kind of was like, you know what? This is the time. This is the moment. I'm free now. I'm single. Free. That's such a horrible way to say it.
Free.
But I'm
Shed
single.
That guy.
I didn't have any kind of job that was important to me and didn't own a home. Didn't have my name on the lease of an apartment even because I'd been living with my boyfriend. And so it was like, this is the moment. And so that's when I started planning for real and eventually a few months later made it happen. But so yes, in a roundabout way, It wasn't, oh, I broke up with this guy, so therefore I must move far away. It wasn't like that.
Yeah.
But I had so many misadventures, Katy. Like, I don't even... I think everyone who dates does, so it's not just expats, but there are cultural things as well as language cultural barriers, language barriers. I don't know which is the harder one, but what you say about being charming is so true. I consider myself a pretty charming person, I hope, pretty clever, but in a foreign language, it's just not as easy. It's not like the repartee, that back and forth that you get with some people when you've got really great chemistry, and when that person is kind of on the same wavelength as you. And if they're kind of a fast person, fast as far as fast thinker, you can get a repartee going, like a Maddie and David for anybody else who ever watched Moonlighting back in the day. I just dated myself terribly there, but I was a little girl when I watched Moonlighting, by the way, just in case.
Bruce Willis and who was that?
Sybil Shepherd.
Sybil Shepherd, of course. Yes, they did have a witty banter.
Mm-hmm. That kind of repartee. Yeah, the witty banter. I love the witty banter. And it's so difficult to do in a foreign language. And I find myself even now, like when I come out with something and I have good timing, and when I make a good joke, I like pat myself on the back. And when I do it in Italian, I'm like, wow, I just made a really great joke. and I had good timing. It's so rare. So if that's a big part of your personality, you're going to have challenges.
Yeah. So what do you use then? Body language? Do you blink your eyes more?
I guess.
Lean into somebody more? It's interesting when you think about stripping language away. What do you have left to work with?
I think you kind of have to have some language. You have to have something to work with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess some people don't at all speak each other's languages. I don't think those relationships usually last. But I have had friends who have been in relationships, with Italians, and who have not spoken so great. They spoke some. The guy spoke some. And I had this one friend who said, honestly, the fact that we don't have the vocabulary to really get in true arguments, that is what makes our relationship good. She's like, because we just can't go there. So we just let it go. We just let everything go.
Well, and even you've said that you and Claudio early on had that trouble too, where you'd get into an argument and you just realize that you were out of your depth.
Yeah.
You couldn't figure out the words to express what you were actually thinking.
Yeah. I have moments today even.
Yeah.
Where, and I'll just say it in English. And luckily now he's to the point where he can get 95% of what I'm saying in English. And he might just ask me like one word, but still the subtext and the context more than subtext can sometimes be lost. Mm-hmm. It's a fun challenge.
So, I mean, everybody's desperately, I'm sure, thinking, Katy, why did you interrupt her? What are some of these misadventures that happened? Tell us some stories.
Well, I was just today chatting with one of my coworkers about, how every woman has her worst date ever. And like you kind of pull it out.
Do we?
I mean, I hope.
Okay.
Like everyone has their most embarrassing moment. Like, This is my most embarrassing moment. And it's hell when you're living it. But then after, it's a great story. And I feel like it's the same with like the date from hell. It's awful when you're going through it. But then afterwards, you have a great story. I can tell this story. It's mildly funny. I don't think it's it's not like Sex in the City worthy. It's not that funny. But I don't know that there was really a language issue there or a cultural issue. And I think what actually threw me off with this person was that he wasn't the typical Italian. And I don't mean that in a positive or a negative way, because my husband is not a typical Italian either, and I love him for that. But I do think that many Italian men have a kind of code when it comes to dating. There's certain rules, and one of those rules is that the man always pays, period. My very first Italian boyfriend, I don't know if I can even call him a boyfriend, because I think it lasted all of a month when I was 20 years old.
We'll count it.
Yeah, I mean, I counted it then, let me say. I kept being like, why do you always pay? And he would just look at me like I was asking him, like,
why are you male?
Like, why are you male? Like, why do you stand up when you pee? And he just looked at me. He's like, I'm a guy. Duh. What? And so I was very used to that. Claudio is a typical Italian in that sense. He would never let me pay for anything when we were dating. But I ended up meeting this guy at a party. It wasn't even a party. It was at a dinner, big dinner out with a bunch of people. And he happened to be sitting across from me. And I was talking to my girlfriend who was sitting beside me about how much I wanted to go to this opening. It was some obscure art history thing that I wanted to go to the next day. And nobody wanted to go with me. I was like, oh, Jilly, why don't you go to this? There's this palace on Via Giulia that's open and it's never open. And she's like, no. And I'm asking this person and I'm asking that person, these friends of mine. And this guy who I'd never met before takes the opportunity and he's like, so I understand that you'd like to go to Palazzo Falconieri, or I think it was. I kind of stopped. I wasn't interested, but I felt like I couldn't say no because I was clearly looking for someone to go with me, and here he is offering to go. So we went, and my opinion didn't change of him at all. It was fine. There was nothing unpleasant about it, and I got to see the palace, and I wasn't alone. But I might have preferred to be alone. I don't know. But the point is, he asked me out on a date, like a true date. Shoot.
Yeah.
And we talked about vulnerability with the girls from the Creatively Complicated podcast. And so I'm just going to put it out there. I'm just going to be honest.
Speaking of which, if you haven't listened to that interview with us on the Creatively Complicated podcast.
Yes. Go and listen. It's a good, interesting talk.
Yeah, it's a good interview, and I think we talk about a lot of things that we actually don't talk about on this show. So
yeah,
it's a different perspective on this. So go check that out if you haven't already.
Creatively Complicated, wherever you get your podcasts. So I will be honest that I was in a time in my life when I was a little bit lonely. Like I might have accepted dates that I didn't really want to go out with just to have something to do,
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has ever been there. So this is many years ago, by the way. Obviously, I've been with my husband for 11 years. So I said yes. I said yes against my better judgment. And I have this thing where if you ask me out on a date, I expect you to plan the date, right?
Okay, fair.
Right?
Sure.
I mean, I don't mind being asked for my opinion, but, don't ask me to go out on a date and then give me the onus of having to plan it.
Sure.
And so that's what this guy did, of course. It's like, oh, well, where should we go? I'm like, you're from here. You're Roman. I have lived here for a year. But I suggested a place, and we met there, and it was just an aperitivo. So it's just like a drink with some snacks. Didn't want to go for the dinner. Too much of a, what's the word, Katy?
Conversation?
Obligation.
Yeah.
Yeah. We go to this really cute little bar, and he proceeds to talk about himself all night. Doesn't ask me one word about myself, which is fine. I don't need to talk about myself. But, he was kind of boring. So it was a point of boring date. But the thing that annoyed me most was that he kept trying to kiss me at the table. Dude, we've never held hands. We've never had an intimate look. I mean, there are signals. There's signals that you give people that you're kind of ready to let them kiss you, right? Is this just me?
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
We have no chemistry. Zero. We're sitting at a table together, yes, but why are you trying to kiss me? And I just kept having to turn my face. He did it 3 times. Dude, are you not getting the point?
You would just flinch.
Basically, yeah. I would just turn my face away.
Okay.
I'm not going to slap the guy, but that might have been the next step. Maybe that would have been more direct.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, maybe here is a cultural difference. I think that Italian women are a little bit hard to get. And they play hard to get. Mm-hmm. Not to throw them all under the bus. That's a stereotype. So they're not all the same. But it's a typical thing that Italian women will wait a long time before going to bed with someone. Which, hey, I think that can be commendable.
Sure.
And I think that Italian men, they kind of take it for granted that if a woman rejects them, that she's playing hard to get. It's not actually that she doesn't want him. It's that she's playing hard to get. This is this game that they have. It's this dance that they have, and it's very, whereas I think Americans are a little bit more direct, and they're like, well, no, actually,
Yeah.
I'm not at all interested in you. And if I were interested, you would know right now.
Yeah.
So I think that could have been it. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. So I kept sort of flinching, yada, yada. So we get up to leave. It was a bar, right? It wasn't a restaurant, so they didn't bring us a bill. We go up to the cash register to pay, and I'm trying to remember if he paid for his own drink or not. But whatever was the case, he did not pay for my drink. It was just the weirdest thing. Just coming from the Italian dating world, I just was shocked. I don't have any problem paying for my own drink. I'm a grown up, but I was just very, very shocked that he didn't even offer. Like usually both people will offer and then one person will insist and the other person will say, oh, all right. That's kind of how it works, but didn't happen like that.
That's an interesting cultural difference, actually, because in the US, of course, normally whether or not someone decides to pay for the other is a signal as well. If you're out to dinner with somebody and you both pull a credit card out and split the bill, it is a little bit of a signal that, not necessarily that there's nothing romantically could go on, but it is a signal that I'm keeping this casual right now. This is just us going out together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I definitely experienced that with non-Italian people. Like I went on a couple of dates with British people or American people. And definitely if I was not interested, I would pull out my wallet like immediately to make that signal. For some reason though, with an Italian, I just didn't even think of it, something that would be laughed at, So anyways, I paid for my drink. Maybe I paid for his. I can't remember. And he's like, well, where should we go now? And I'm thinking to myself, nowhere. I did not really want to continue, but whatever.
Well, you're just a pushover at this point.
I was a bit of a pushover back then. I'll be honest, I was. Or at least that night I was being a pushover. But don't worry, this ends well.
Oh, good.
For me, anyway. So I thought to myself, I don't really like talking to this person. So I came up with a brilliant idea. I had this friend, this older gentleman, who sang with a jazz band. I said, let's go. He's singing tonight at Gregory's Jazz Club. So let's go and hear him sing. And I thought, this is perfect because it's the type of jazz club where the people there don't really talk. Like they actually watch the musicians. The musicians are really the focal point. Of course, this friend of mine, Tom, who was singing, he was like dedicating every song to Tiffany and Andrea. Like I was like, dude, he's not my boyfriend. And it was really kind of silly, but it was fine. I was just trying not to talk to him, and I was acting like I was really into the music so that he wouldn't talk to me. And again, he refuses to pay for my drink. And I'm like, okay, well, dude, I keep saying dude tonight. I don't know why. It's not really a thing I say very often, but... Oh, and I have to say one more thing. See, my father was a very, very much of a gentleman. He had good manners. He always opened the door for a woman or let her walk in front. Like he was just very good about that. I always looked for that in a man, and I always have. In Rome, the sidewalks are very, very narrow. And sometimes you can only have one person walking on a sidewalk. It's that narrow that you can't even have two people. We'd be walking down the sidewalk, and if I were a man, I would step back, right?
Yeah.
He would step in front of me. And every time a car would pass, he would just push in front of me. It really bothered me. So guys, if you are listening and you need some dating advice, always step back and let the lady walk in front of you. So anyway, we're getting ready to leave. It was very, very late by this time, definitely after 1 o'clock. And we were in the area near the Spanish Steps where, at that hour, there's really nothing going on. There's no buses, it's just dead. My eyes are peeled for a taxi at this point. And he says to me, how do you plan on getting home from here? I lived in Trastevere at the time. It's all the way across town. It's too far to walk at that time of night if you're a woman alone. And I said, I think I'm just going to get a taxi. And he said, oh, okay. And I'm like, oh, God, what is he going to suggest? This has been a horrible date. Like, he cannot but know this has been a horrible date. I have rebuffed his every advance. I have not engaged in conversation more than is necessary. There's no chemistry. And he says, well, I live slightly out of the city, and I didn't bring my car because I didn't know where to park on a Saturday night. And I'm like, and I should care because? No, I didn't say that. But he said, yeah, I really would hate to have to take a night bus. And he just waited for me to offer. Apparently he was waiting and I didn't. And so he said, well, do you have like some corner of your apartment where I could just sleep for the night? Are you seriously suggesting that? Are you crazy? And at that moment, as I had that thought, because I didn't say it out loud, this cab comes by and I throw out my hand and I hail the cab. Have a great night. Bye. I jumped into the cab and I was like, go, 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 go. And he was left on the street alone. And he never called me, which is
good.
The best thing that could come of it. Yeah. That's probably my worst date that I can think of.
Were there ever any major misunderstandings because of your lack of language, or your lack of navigating the dating world of a totally different culture?
I don't know. Maybe I've blocked it out. It feels like it has been so long ago that I was dating. I feel like we should have someone on, one of my single friends who's in the dating world right now. Because I never did Italian Tinder. Oh, I did. You know what I did do? Way before Tinder existed, before smartphones existed, I did speed dating.
You did?
Oh my God.
In Italy?
I did.
In Italy?
I did.
Oh my
I did.
gosh.
I did speed dating one time. Oh my God. It was the most horrible. It was, oh my God, it was hell. It was awful. But my friend convinced me to do it. She's like, oh, come on, The way to convince me was, I was like, these are men who are like really busy because they've got great careers. They don't have time to lose. I'm like, all right, fine. And so we went, and it was like every single conversation was exactly the same. Me saying, yes, I'm from America, and them saying, wow, that's interesting. What brought you here? And me having to say what brought me here. And then ding. Oh my Lord. It was awful. But I did get a kind of crash course in like how the average Italian is on a date without having to go on that many dates, which was nice to avoid. But Katy, this is the thing. I have dated very, very, very few Americans in my life.
Yeah.
I can maybe think of 2.
I know, that's the unusual thing about you. And that's not just because you were living in foreign places.
No.
You just were always attracted to foreign people.
Yeah, my first boyfriend was American. We were together for 3 years, and then that was it. I had a short, I wouldn't even call it a relationship. I had a romance with an American here in Rome that lasted a number of months, and that's it. I don't think I've even been on a date with any other American besides those 2.
But it's not just Italians either, right?
No, it's not just Italians. When I was living in the States, I had a Puerto Rican boyfriend for a long time, and there were others. There was definitely a Spaniard in there somewhere, a Sicilian, which I count separately.
So that's interesting. Does that mean that if we're talking about culture and dating, does that mean that there's something about the American male that you don't really like? Or do you think it's circumstantial?
No, I don't think it's circumstantial. No, I'm a xenophile. I've always loved people who are different from me, culturally different from me. I love the foreign language. I love the accent. Whether they're speaking a foreign language or whether they're speaking my language with an accent, I love both. I love the differences, the cultural differences. I think it's exciting. It's sexy. Dating someone so much like me from my culture just seemed boring. Strangely enough, dating an American in Rome after I'd been living there for 3 or 4 years, I guess by that point, that was the novelty. So that was actually kind of fun. I was like, wow, this is so novel. I can actually speak my own language and I can be charming and clever. And actually with that guy, we really had a great banter. Mm-hmm. We had a great repartee. I enjoyed that. That was one of the things probably I enjoyed most about that quote unquote relationship. But no, I always liked foreign guys, and it wasn't on an accident that I dated so many, for sure, and a married one.
Yes.
Have you ever dated a foreigner?
I've been on a date while I was in Vietnam. I don't know if we ever talked about it.
I don't know.
I mean, that doesn't really answer your question. Like, have I ever actually dated a foreigner?
They could have been living in the United States, but they weren't American.
I don't think so. I've dated several mixed race people who had an immigrant parent, but I don't think I've ever dated anybody who was just visiting or who had moved here from somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I did go on one date in Vietnam, and I will say that date where it led nowhere, obviously, because I was only in the country for maybe 2 weeks at that time. It was an ongoing relationship with somebody. Those of you who haven't been listening for a long time, I used to go to Vietnam twice a year. And over that time, there would be people that I would see over and over and over again. And eventually one of the people that I knew was the bartender at this one bar in a hotel that we often stayed in. And we were there, we showed up again, and he had the band sing a song that was dedicated to me. And then I looked over at him and I'm like, with that kind of like, what the heck look. And he was, very embarrassed, of course, but also was laughing at the fact. And it was sort of his way of opening the door to being friends, I think. He had spent a lot of time working on cruise ships before he got this bartending gig. And so he had been around a lot of people speaking English. So his English was great. And I think he liked the idea of having somebody to practice it with, or more friends that were English speakers. And he was very cute. And he asked me out on a date. And my dad, who does now listen to this podcast, though he didn't before, I don't believe, Dad, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that you knew that I went on this date when we were there. So he was a bartender, which means, you know, if you're a bartender at a largely American hotel in Vietnam, it means that you stay up until about 2 a.m, closing the bar down. And he had asked me to go out with him after he got off work. I had a friend with me, and so I said, well, it doesn't seem like too big of a risk. I've known this guy for a year or two. I have a friend who knows that I'm going to go on this date, and so she can let people know if I vanish. We know where the guy works. He got off work at 2:30 in the morning, called my room. I went downstairs, jumped on the back of his motorbike, and took off into the night of Vietnam. And it was the first time where I felt like I had a sense of what it would actually be like to live there and to be a young person in that country. Not just a visitor, I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
That insight into what it would actually be like to live here and have friends here.
Oh, I think that's such a big part of it, though. That's a big draw of dating a local.
Right.
And I felt that totally the first time, my first little Italian boyfriend when I was 20.
Yeah. We had till like 7 in the morning or something, or 6 or 7 in the morning. And so what did we do? We went to a cafe that was still open. We ate pho sitting on the sidewalk. We went back to his parents' house and watched a movie. I mean, that's another thing about Vietnam, is that everybody lives together. And so you also had this sense of what it would be like to be a girlfriend while the parents are asleep and you're still awake and it's 4 in the morning and you're sitting downstairs. And he slept in the middle of their living room. His bed was in the corner of the living room. So we just sat on his bed and watched a movie, and the sun was rising. He drove me back to the hotel and I went in and met everybody.
You had a good time?
Yeah. Kissed some.
Really?
Kissed a bunch, which was nice. And then, of course, over time, you just lose track of that person. We didn't go to Vietnam as much. You know, we didn't talk when I was gone. It was never going to be a real thing.
Yeah.
It was just sort of a eye into what it would be like to have a real life here. A lot of the people that we were there visiting were not in the same economic spectrum as me. Like, my dad was there doing a lot of charitable work. A lot of the people I was friends with there were really, really poor, which is not to denigrate them in any way, but it wasn't like people with my exact experience. There was a difference, and Quan and some of these other people I met at that time were the first people I'd met that felt like that if I lived here, these would be my friends. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was just sort of an interesting picture into the country.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I don't have any other experiences dating foreign people.
But it's funny what you said. It really made me think when you said that's one of the main reasons. I mean, it's not like so the guy, his name was Gaetano, the first Italian I ever dated. I was in Italy for a summer doing a music program. I'd met a whole bunch of Italian people with this other American girl I was with. We met these really great Italian people, and they took us to this really cool bar. It was actually a nightclub. It was during the salsa rage. And that is where I met this guy, Gaetano, who was Sicilian, but he was living in Pisa. He was studying there for university. He was an amazing dancer, and he had a scooter. And it was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me. I mean, up to that point, anyway. Zipping through the streets of Pisa or Lucca. I was living in Lucca. He was living in Pisa. And Pisa is kind of an annoying city to be a tourist in because, you know, everybody flocks to the Tower of Pisa, and it's like, okay. But it's actually a great city to live in as a young person because it has this huge university, and it's just got a lot of great nightlife, and it all unfolds around the Arno River, and everybody just sits out along the Arno. And I just felt like, wow, I'm like really living Italy right now. It wasn't just because I was there for a month instead of a week. It was because of this guy. And he totally broke my heart, like trashed my heart, but it was so worth it.
Do tell. Was that
he did the old-fashioned version of ghosting. If you could ghost back in those days, that's what it was. He basically ghosted me, and I called him, and I was like, "What's going on? I thought we were going out of town for the weekend." And he's like, "No, I can't." Okay. Are you breaking up with me? And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." Great. But I wasn't okay. I was devastated, and I sobbed the next week.
Yeah.
And then I met some Spanish guy in Spain, and it was all fine. I hope my mom's not listening to this one. I don't know. She doesn't know about these stories.
Have you ever ghosted anybody?
I would never do that to someone. Could never, would never.
Well, what about if it was that guy, the guy that you were talking about earlier, the terrible date?
Andrea.
What if he had gone to the restroom and you had just jumped in a cab?
I don't know. I feel like I'm just not that rude and cruel. It's hurtful.
Yeah, I only did it once.
Oh, you did? Oh, sorry. Cruel you.
No, where I vanished on somebody? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Well, can you tell us?
I think it was a first date.
Is that an excuse?
I,
Because doesn't sound like an excuse to me.
he was actually my hairdresser. A wise friend had told me that you should never go out with your hairdresser. This is why. Because then you can never go see that person again.
Yes.
So I knew him, and I always had found him attractive, and we decided to go out, and I was just getting the weirdest vibes from him the whole night. Kind of oddly possessive. We were with other people. It wasn't just us, right? So I didn't just leave him alone at a table.
Oh, okay. That's a bit better.
We were with a group of people, but he was oddly possessive. He kept saying things that made it sound to his friends like he was definitely going to be sleeping with me by the end of the night. And
ugh. Okay, I forgive you now.
And I was just like, how am I going to get rid of this guy when this party is over? Kind of like with your guy being like, hey, can I sleep in the corner of your room? I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. He was just in the middle of a big conversation with his friends, and I walked outside just to get some fresh air. Mm-hmm. And a cab stopped and dropped somebody else off at the same bar, and I just got in that cab and left.
Yeah, sometimes those cabs are sent from God.
And he was so mad.
Yeah.
It must have probably taken him like an hour to realize I was gone. But when he did, he called me up, and he just screamed at me on the phone. And the whole time I was just thinking, dodged a bullet here. You know,
that's nice.
I didn't even feel bad about it.
Yeah.
I understood why he was angry, but I was thinking also, boy, this is a side of you I never would have suspected, and I'm so glad I'm not anywhere near you right now.
Yikes.
So
Yikes.
it was that spidey sense where you're like, this is a bad situation. You know, it's leading to nothing good, so I'm going to just go ahead and vanish. And I don't think I would have done that if I hadn't gotten that feeling.
You know, that made me think of a story. This isn't my story. It was a friend of a friend or something. She was dating someone. They were not necessarily an established couple, but they'd been dating for a while. And she invited him over for lunch or dinner. And, you know, it's funny because I invited Claudio over for lunch after we'd been dating for a month or so, because he had never let me pay for anything, not even a cup of coffee. And I was like, listen, I know you're never going to let me pay for a meal. Let me make you lunch. And I made him this really fancy lunch, and he thought I could cook, and it was great. That's why he married me. And he discovered that I can't cook. No, I'm just kidding. But the truth is I'm not a very good cook, but I did make that one good meal. That works, by the way. No. But anyway, so she is Italian. She's Southern Italian, and Southern Italian women, you know, they like to cook. They like to take care of their partner in that way. And so she made him this huge, elaborate meal. And the guy, halfway through the meal, was like, you know, I really need to go out and get a pack of cigarettes. I need to smoke. I don't have any cigarettes. And he went downstairs, and he never came back. Isn't that awful?
And we have no idea why.
No, I think she eventually called. They eventually heard from each other, and he basically just said, I was feeling overwhelmed. It was too much. I think he maybe thought she was wanting to marry him or something. And it's like, dude.
I understand that too. I totally understand that.
But you could be polite enough to sit through the meal.
Right.
I mean, you don't have to marry the woman just because you know.
Right. Yeah, I don't agree with that. But I can only identify with that because I can remember once being asked out by a guy. I've broken up with people who were a little bit too overt in their I don't know. It's not their romance. It's like cheesy romance. It's like what they think should be romantic. Not that they're actually romantic, you know? These over-the-top gestures.
Oh, no. Can you give us an example?
Oh, gosh, I could give you so many examples. But let me just tell you about this guy before I forget. So this one guy, and, you know, another terrible date, actually, and the only time I ever went out with this guy, he asked me out in the hallway in high school. So you're already a little awkward, right? Because it's high school. And he asked me out, and I was like, I guess. And he freaked out. And I don't know what he was thinking. Like if he thought I would find it romantic or something, he's like, "You will? Oh my God, she's going to go on a date with me." Instantly mortified. And I'm like, no, I really don't want to go on a date with this guy. And everybody's kind of just looking, what the heck is going on as they're walking by in the hall. And then I had to actually go on a date with this guy. Ugh. It was just awful. Needless to say, I never went on a date with him again. I mean, another example, maybe it's like people learn to rein it in a little bit after high school and early 20s. Because I think in high school, with asking people to homecoming and stuff, it amps it all up. Huge gestures of romance. And yeah, I had the boyfriend once who, he should have known better. I was a sophomore in high school. He was a freshman in college. Showed up at my school carrying a boombox on his shoulder.
Oh God, was it like when Say Anything happened?
Oh my God, no. He was just playing music. Walked into the middle of the hall, sang me a song, gave me a dozen roses. And the whole time I'm thinking, what is he doing here? What's going on? And is he asking me to my school's homecoming? Because that was the only thing that was going on nearby. And after he was done with the song, he gave me a hug and he said, "Happy anniversary." And I said, "What?" We'd only been dating a month. And at that point, I thought to myself, this guy's got to go.
See, Katy, that is such a shame because I was the opposite of you back then. I would have fainted in delight if a guy had done that for me, especially a guy I was dating. I did not really date in high school, as you know.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know, I was a late bloomer or something. But we didn't go to the same school, I should say. So I didn't go to this big public school with lots of kids. I went to a very small, very repressed, religious private school where I knew all the boys since we were in kindergarten together. So, that might be part of it. Oh my gosh, that kind of gesture, the flowers, the music, the serenading, I would have lost it. And I still love that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't like if it's totally manufactured, but if there's any little bit of it that is genuine, I love it. There's a tradition in Italy. It's that when you get married, a couple of weeks before the wedding, you do a serenade. The groom does a serenade to the girl. And I mean, this comes from a long tradition of actually singing and having your friends with their, mandolins or whatever, their guitars, come with you, and you stand beneath the bride's window and you sing to her, and she has to give you a rose. To my still girlish 14-year-old heart, I love that. I just love that. But it's gotten a little bit tacky over the years. So now what they do, I've been to one. This is how I know. Because now it's not a surprise. Everybody knows when it's happening. Maybe the bride doesn't know, but everyone else knows. Tons of people come to watch. Everyone you know shows up. But they don't really sing anymore unless somebody happens to be a great singer, which is, rare. So either they have like a karaoke type of thing going on, or sometimes they actually bring like a professional singer. And you maybe sort of sing with the professional singer. It's really tacky music now. But still, I'm like, we went to one, Claudio and I went to one, and one of his colleagues. And I was like, Claudio, you have to serenade me before we get married. And he's like, don't even think about it. It's not happening. And I was like, what? He's like, it's the tackiest. I'll never do that. I could never do that. Because to him, he didn't see the old-fashioned romantic side. To him, it was something normal that a lot of people do that he found really cheesy. To me, I mean, nobody in the United States serenades anyone except for your ex-boyfriend. It's totally romantic to me. So I did not get a serenade. And I really was like, please serenade me. You can play the guitar. You can sing a little bit. Just serenade me. You don't have to invite everyone you know. And he didn't do it. I was very upset, but I got over it. And I think that's one of the reasons I sang to him at our wedding. He didn't serenade me, but I will sing to you.
Yes, that was nice. I don't know. I think there's a difference between romantic gesture that's inspired by you or by the relationship that you have versus a romantic gesture that's just coming from whatever.
From a movie that you saw. Yeah.
Something that worked in the past.
Yeah.
Something that worked on the last girl. That's kind of the difference of it for me. It just felt like a well-worn path that wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. It was for some other thing, for some other reason, or this invented idea of what romance is when you as a teenager haven't really figured it out yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it felt more like that particular person, who's a very nice human being. It was just like one thing after another like that. And it just, I just knew I needed out. It could have also been because I was 15 and he was 18 or 19, and I was thinking, dude, you're in college. What are you doing hanging out with me?
Yeah.
Doing all these grand gestures and stuff. Go be in college.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I did want to ask you one thing, though, to end in this episode so long, but it doesn't matter. But flirting-wise, when did you know that you were a good flirt in Italian?
Oh,
or did you ever know, I guess?
Well, I know now. I don't know, Katie. These things are so hard to put your finger on. Flirting is something that is, in general, so hard to put your finger on. Like, what works for some people doesn't work for other people.
Sure, yeah.
And I do think a lot of flirting is nonverbal. It's in the eyes and the touch of the hand, or...
Yeah.
It's not always verbal, although I think that the banter is a big aspect of it and it can make it very fun, but I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. So given that, I mean, you didn't date a lot in high school, but you were definitely a romantic, and I don't know if you want people to know this, but you definitely watched a lot of soap operas, and you were certainly into romantic dramas and stuff. And
A lot of costume period pieces.
Yeah, a lot of costume period pieces, a lot of moonlighting.
A Room with a View. I was obsessed with A Room with a View and moonlighting, but mostly A Room with a View, impromptu.
Yeah, so it's in English that you cultivate this sense of witty banter. So does that mean that in English, witty banter is different than witty banter in Italian if you're flirting?
It's definitely different. I mean, it's different, but it's the same. I don't know, Katie. This is so hard. It's so, but it's also so hard because I haven't had very many experiences with Americans, with people from my own, even people from my own language. I think I went on one date with a British person, and I think that is the extent of my English language suitors.
Wow, that's amazing.
The two American guys and the British guy. It's really hard to say. I really haven't had very much experience flirting in English.
Yeah, interesting. So interesting. Well, if you are currently trying to date in a country that's not your original country, we want to hear about it. Let us know. I mean, I guess you could tell us if you're just trying to date in general.
Or if you're trying to date someone, or you are dating someone in your own country who is not from your country.
Yes. The complications of that, the joys of it. We want to hear your stories. You can write to us at bittersweetlife@mail.com. mail.com.
You can also find us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just search for The Bittersweet Life Podcast. You'll find us.
Yes. And visit our website, thebittersweetlife.net. You can also write us through that. And if you are so inclined, you can donate to the show there. Or you can join us on Patreon. We're at patreon.com/thebittersweetlifepodcast. There's a whole bunch of prizes. I just sent out a whole bunch of stickers. I got a second type of sticker, Tiffany, did I tell you?
You told me you were going to.
So now I'm sending out multiple kinds of stickers to people.
Exciting. Anyway,
There's a whole bunch of different levels there. So check that out as well.
It's Patreon, patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast.
And if you're trying to start a business or a tour company or something like that, be like Madeline Jawar, who supports us at the $50 level, so that we mention that you should use her service, Italy Beyond the Obvious. And we can do that for you too. Well, until next time, be safe, everyone. Like, what do you say? Be romantic, everyone. Be authentically romantic, everyone.
And be witty.
And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Marks.
Join us again. Bye. Thanks for all the ways you support us. Give us a good rating on iTunes. Subscribe to the show. And pledge your support at patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast. And for goodness sake, interact with us on social media. Just search for The Bittersweet Life Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Or send us an email at bittersweetlife@mail.com. That's bittersweetlife@mail.com. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, send us a letter there too. Our logo is by Jody Rick at the Lost Laboratory, with help from our muse, Caravaggio. Talk to you next week. Bye.